Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I hope you did enjoy my previous tutorial on cinematic lighting techniques. As a lighting supervisor, this is my bread and butter and I really enjoy doing these kind of tutorials as well. Today we will be working on another environment. I asked my Discord people, I asked my Patreon members if they like this kind of stuff, and with their feedback I just continue doing more. We will be deep diving into height fields, into Gaea height fields, creating some environments and how to scatter environments, how to follow a reference as close as possible, and then also diving into Nuke to create the final result with some depth phasing to create some scale and interest in the scene. And yeah, I hope you will learn something from it. And as always, my Patreon is available and you can get access to all my scene files ever uploaded, or you can go to my Patreon shop where you can get individual tutorials as well. But the bang for the buck is to sign up as a member and you get always full access to all my videos ever. Anyways, I would say let's hop into Houdini and get going with this tutorial. Alright, so now we are back in Houdini and I just want to give you an overview of how I created this biome environment icy cold dry looking scene. So essentially, looking at our final renders, this is what we're dealing with, and you can see already in my reference here, this is kind of what I was trying to follow. Obviously not to a T because it looks a bit different, especially the mountain in the background, and honestly I still need to work on my environment mountain skills quite a bit. But either way, this is the result, and you can see we have nice scatter grass in the foreground, some nice detailed rocks, midground big cliff, and then the full background in the back. And then this is the raw render, so you can see it looks, there's still some comp treatment, mainly for the background. The foreground is pretty much the same, a little bit of fringing and the depth of field and a little bit of deformations, but initially it's not too far off. So that's what I'm dealing with, and I want to walk you now through the process of how I created this. It was for me a great experience to get more familiar with everything to do with environments, and a big thanks to Stefan Hampel for helping me out with just some generalist workflows and stuff like that. And we will be also dabbing a little bit into Gaea as well, to give you just an insight. So as usual, the scene files will be provided through my Patreon. I will not be going into a step-by-step stuff, so it's mainly an overview. You can see at the top, here's my data input. This is where I'm bringing in all the mountains, the geos, everything like that. And the second section is a scatter where I do all the instancing. So I have a little bit of manual placements, and then I've got like random scatter stuff. HI, very simple lighting setup, and then the CryptoMat outputs for comp, and I will be showing you a little bit of that as well. But again, so the reference is split into foreground, midground, and background. And initially we are starting with the main, which is just importing my render camera. You can see in the Solaris stage here, I just have my main camera, and that is being pulled in from subs. This is where I initially started the project, is creating the foreground and then roughly placing the grounds and creating some kind of composition. And then I did dial it in a little bit later. So back to lobs, I'm hitting N to open up my little quick toggle thingy. So camera comes in, I do transform the camera here because I didn't want to recalculate all the scatter points and stuff if I had an animated camera up front. Anyways, so this is then pulling in the foreground geometry. You can see that's my shot camera, it's already moving. If I look through that, this is kind of the pan, very simple animation. Then I'm pulling in the midground. Then I'm pulling in the midground cliff, which is this guy. It's kind of a kit bash thing with lots of cliffs. I can show you all of that as well. Where all of that has been bashed together, and then I've got my Gaea background, which is the full environment at the back here. This guy, you can see it's quite detailed. We don't really see much of it. There's a little canyon as well, and then render geometry settings just to set up. Actually, did I actually use it in the end? Yeah, just to reduce the dicing a little bit. I didn't want to subdivide it too much. And then material library is the shading. So I have mega scans for some of them, and then also some tiled triplanar textures here. I will go into a little bit of that for sure. And then scatter, we have our scatter instance object, which is a sharp rock, which looks like this. And you can see it already comes in with textures, and I will show you a cool way. It's a third-party tool that I use a lot with Houdini, which really saves my butt. Then I have two little rock pieces, but these are the two rocks that I'm scattering in this instancer. So you can see I'm gathering a lot of points, and then I'm scattering these rocks to them. Same with the wild grass. I've got three different instance source objects. This grass, it's like 10 per little sub object. You can see what these ones, and then the basket grass, and these are all Megascan assets. And then I'm just putting them, instancing them as well on points, and that's pretty much it. It's actually very, very basic. And I will just now maybe go a little bit into more detail. So as I said, I started out in subs. So I'm heading over to the object context and heading into foreground. And this is my initial foreground geo. I probably spent too much time on figuring out how to work with height fields, because in the end, it's mainly covered by grass and you don't see anything of all the details I try to put in here. Starting out with a height field paint to get some kind of masking on it. Then I'm resampling it to get more detail. Height field pattern is a kind of a thing where you can just repeat a pattern as like randomize it, like cell noise or something like that. I use that to create some kind of breakup. Then height field pattern on top of that, which is finer detail. You can see it has now a little bit of these ridges and stuff. Another mask I painted for my path. So this was something I wanted to art direct a little bit based on my camera. And I try to follow the reference as well, which is here. You can see I've got lots of other things to do still, but this is the reference where you can see there's this path. And I just try to kind of eyeball it from the camera view. And then I flattened that. So I kind of tried to even it out with lots of blur. You can see without the blur, it's just a deep gash here. And then I just kind of blurred it out to make it flatter, remapped it to get some kind of little edges to it, mask clear, and then I rotated it to get a little bit more detail. You can see now this is kind of what I had in the end, very straightforward. And then looking through the camera, I did transform it to align it a little bit better. And then I think the more interesting thing is the scatter side. This is kind of generating the points for all the grass. And I first converted this to a geometry in order to use this mask by feature shadowing effect, where you can provide a normal direction and then it's kind of ray casting from this angle, and then it's kind of creating proper shadow. So it's just for optimization. I didn't want to scatter points which we don't ever see. That's why it's kind of behind it, and then that's what it is. I'm blasting the rest, so I'm keeping those masked by object. So I'm converting this back using the geo to mask the height field with it. Then I'm using another masking option, mask by occlusion. It's kind of subtracting or multiplying with my existing mask. It's just so that my scatter points are more detailed. A hand-drawn mask, which is my path, to kind of empty it out so no grass will scatter there. And then I'm using my shot camera to also mask by objects to kind of subtract from all of these points to just scatter where I actually need them to optimize even further. And then last step is to add additional noise to it, like little clumping of grass. And then finally, I'm using the height field scatter to create those points. And we have 160,000 in the foreground, and this is scattering this area. And then scatter align is creating random p-scale and random rotation. And then I'm just caching it out, and I cached also out the height field, and I cached the geo, which is used in Solaris as well. So that's the geo, and then these are the points on top of that, and that is now for just the foreground. And I did exactly the same for the midground. It's almost a carbon copy. You can see this is my mesh. Did a little bit more painting, art directed painting with a couple of these masks here, but in the end it's the same. Scattering is also done the same way. In the end we just have scatter points here. Not as much scattering or shadowing because we kind of see most of it, and that is that. And then for the background, this was a little bit of a challenge. I had initially done it also with height fields alone, but I could not just get that detail that I was getting through Gaea. So again, a big thanks to Stefan to help me out with this a little bit. And then I came up with this setup where I have different mountains and I could kind of art direct them a little bit better. So I was just creating individual little mountains like you can see here. And then I was adjusting their heights, transforming them where I need them to be. Did that for 4 different ones, and I combined them like a little comp node where you can use max operations and stuff like that, push them together, and then you kind of got this. It's roughly, I first thought, okay, let me grab the actual height data from that area, but it wasn't working as good, unfortunately, just because of the compression. From here on, outcrops, which adds like these little chunky rocks on everything, kind of helps a little bit. Then adding erosion, rock noise, adding smaller details, ground texture, even finer details. And then what I did at the end was creating a canyon that I was kind of blending with the other, with the mountain range. And then I got some kind of very interesting cliff edge, because in the reference again, what you can see is that the mountains, they go all the way down here and there's like this valley at the bottom. So I just had to create some really steep fall off there. And I just thought, okay, well, let's just use the canyon to kind of combine that. And I did that successfully, I feel. Then I created a texture base, but this is a really awesome feature. You can, based off all these features, you can create like a mask and then use a set map. Like, it's all new to me, but in the end, I got really cool detail from it, like as a texture base. Color erosion kind of fades in where water would flow and blends the colors. So it gives you quite the nice effects. And the set map at the top is white. It's supposed to be snow. And then I'm using these slope nodes to create these gradients, mixing them together, and then in the end I'm just combining that white sat map with this weathered look, and this is then initially my base texture for my render side. And then I'm exporting the meshes, exporting the height field, and exporting the base color. That's all I've done in Gaea. And then back in here we can now hop into LUPS again, where you can see I'm pulling in that stuff. And here, material library is where I assign all the shaders. And just for the time being, I will disable the scatter. We can just queue it so it's disabled, and then we can view from here. And then we can start to render, and I can show you a little bit. Okay, so this is now XPU launched, and you can see this is the Gaea mountain in here. And then if I hop into the material network, you can now see that we have the BG mountain. And if I now sample the base color, I can hit X. You should now see that's our base texture. And then I did a couple of ranges to, just extract some interest, created a roughness map from it, which just helps a little bit with the specular response. And then I just used a noise on top of that to create additional bump mapping, just because it was a little bit too smooth and I didn't want to displace it as much. So that's pretty much the shading setup for it, for the background mountain. Nothing too crazy with that. And then I have this one, which is quite interesting. This is done, I think, fully with hex tile triplanar projections. Let's see if I can pull it up. And these are, as I said before, kind of textures from Megascans. And this is using these nodes here. Karma hextile triplanar, you can put in a texture and then it will create you randomized little islands, clusters that you can rotate and scale. So it's pretty versatile and pretty fun to work with. Then I have a triplanar albedo, which is just projected again the same way. So it's just really nice to work with triplanars for environments because you can blend them and stuff looks quite organic pretty quick. No displacement again, and we just created a nice roughness map from this as well. And then this is just on top of that, barely seeable actually. And what I wanted to show you is the setup, which is actually quite nice, how to get there very quick using Megascans. I think that is actually more interesting. Let's see, sometimes the viewer kind of goes dead on me. But in the end, I'm using the OD tools, which you can buy, but it's very worth it. And this is not plugged. It's just something I like to use a lot. And for here, I have my 3D objects, for instance. So I just went to the bridge, can just pull it up. And then if I like something, I can just download it from the bridge. Stay here, please. And then whatever you want to do, you click it and you hit that little download icon. It saves to a certain location where OD Tools reads it from. And then you have the same kind of library local on your machine. And all I have to do now is drag something in here. And then it asks you for which render engine. And in this case, using Karma, so that's material X. Then it pulls that in. It creates you somewhere the import for it. There you go. Nordic coastal cliff. And you can go to scene view. And it will already come with pretty much most of the heavy lifting done. Let's see why I can't frame it. There you go. You can see it has already the textures connected. Everything is done pretty well. I can quickly just grab a light source and preview this. Let's see. Obviously this is blown out because it's now hit by the direct sun, but this is now rendered, and some things that need to be changed, but then again they depend on the render, is the materials itself. And for displacement, so one thing that is different is displacements are from -1 to 1, and I think Megascans exports them from 0 to 1. So what you would need to do is just plug in a range in between and make sure you are going from -1 to 1. So that is one thing I always do. And then you can just play with the roughness. Sometimes I feel they are always too dry by default. So I like to play with that. So let's just start the render again. Actually, let's just hop in here. You can also use Ctrl+1 and 2 to create hotkeys. So I then went to roughness, head X. This is now my roughness map. Then I create a quick range in between, hook that up, and exit here to preview it. And then it's essentially just waiting for the compile to complete, because then it's way more interactive. And then you can play with the values until you get what you kind of want. I like rocks that are a little bit more specular. And just by pushing up the in-min values, you kind of get that effect already. So disable this. Now you can see we get some specky rocks, and this is kind of how I did. I spent a little bit of time doing it on all of these rocks, and then I had a pretty successful result. And what I didn't show yet was the MG sub import, so we can hop in there quick. And this is now pulling in all the hero cliffs. I kit bashed them in a different scene, but essentially it's just pulling in a couple of these rocks that I just shown you from the library. Just pull in these guys, transform them, rotate them, all of that. And then I bashed them all together. You will see there are some holes at times on the background and stuff. So you can see at the bottom actually how I moved them all together and created that cliff. So that's pretty straightforward. And to the scatter, the same thing. I just went to the library, went to my little plants here. Then I picked these three, dropped them in, had the shaders assigned. You can see these are all my LODs. Some I disabled because they were not great. So for instance, if you want to look at this one, it's just very small compared to the bigger ones. And so I just disabled them, and then they are not being instanced. And then for the material, all I changed was using, and the surface, I enabled thin walled. So it's essentially a single scatter surface. And then just plugged in the base color, adjusted it so whenever the sun is coming from the back, you can see it's kind of a little bit more translucent, like glowing, like here as well, glowing. Let's go to the raw render. Actually, you can see now these guys are glowing here. And that's kind of what the backscatter is doing. And what I all then did was just hook that up into the instancer, and you can see I'm using the paths, prototype paths, which are essentially the paths that you can see here. And I'm just saying, okay, these guys are the ones that's supposed to be instanced. And then this is all it is to it pretty much. And if I now jump here and hit Karma hit Karma XBU, and this is now in the viewport. And you can see if I zoom very closely here, somewhere on the mountain, we got a little bit of grass. So you can, oh, that's actually floating a little bit, but it's there. You can see it's being scattered, and we are now somewhere far in the mountain ridges. But yeah, this is kind of the scene with everything in place. And then all I did was rendering this through Karma and through my little deadline farm manager. And then we ended up in Nuke, and I will show you things in Nuke. All right, so in Nuke, I rendered 240 frames, around 6 to 10 minutes a frame, roughly. I exported crypto mats and not much more as subsurface scattering or something like that. I grabbed a backplate from HUI Haven, which I graded a little bit and offset, and I put that obviously behind the mountain range. You can see here, is there a comment? No, there you go. So I just placed it there. And I did a couple of crypto mats. You can see I'm picking some of the rocks here. This artifacting is just my current view here, so I can just, I think, go to raw and should be fine. No, I don't, it's not updating, but it's the masks are fine. And then I'm using PMATs as well to grab certain elements to just grade them down a little bit. Another PMAT here to darken this little section. I thought it's too jagged and too low res, so I just used a PMAT to grab a certain area, and then I was able to just darken it down. Lifting a little bit the blacks on the rocks here, they were a little bit too crunchy. Also, this looks not great. And then let's see what the next one was here. Grabbing the SSS, subsurface scattering, and grading it down to be super sharp like this. And then I was using that to kind of plus it back over the grass just to get a little bit more speck on them, a little bit more glow on each of these grass straws. This was just bumping up the specks. I tried to get more speck on the rocks, so I just used the Luma key to get a little bit of the bright stuff, and I just graded that up a little bit. Just, you can see it's a very minor change. Let's see, actually, is it visible? Yeah, there you go. There you go. It's a minor change. Then I used Expo Glow to just get a little bit of glow on everything. You can see a little bit of the foreground stuff is glowing now, and you can see where the sky meets the rocks, the mountains. We get some nice color bleeding. And then on the right side, I was using the depth path to create some nice hazing, using grade tools to pick min and max, essentially, values, and then using them to grade the background to create some depth in the image. Without it, it feels very shallow, I feel, and you can't really perceive how far they are away. So I really push the grades a lot to get some good depth in here. Then a little bit of lens distortion. It just adds a tiny bit of lens realism to it. You can see it's not much, just kind of adding a small bit, adding chromatic aberration, which happens because of the lens fringing. It's usually it's good in the center, but then towards the end to the outside, it kind of fringes out. A little bit of defocus, using PXF ZD focus, which is just a ZD focus on steroids. It has a little bit more lens simulation that you can apply, then a little bit of a vignetting. And then I used optical flares to create me a little bit of a flare pass. Optical flares are quite nice because you can use the 3D scene. I'm pulling in my render camera here. Where is it? There it is. And it's animated, obviously. I placed an axis as well, which is my sun at the top here. And then optical flares does actually place the flare where the axis is. So I can actually move it in real depth, and you can see everything aligns with that. And then I just wrote that out to disk, and then plus this back on top. So that's my flare pass, kind of matching what is in the reference. Yeah, and then it's just writing it out. And you can see here at the bottom, I do have a little bit of a version collection here. And this was mainly toward the end of the project. So I'm just playing a little bit with the depth hazing here and the shadow sides, and then adjusted a little bit the scatter. You can see the density of the scatter change, and I played with the snow at the mountains a little bit, and then adjusted the lighting at some point as well. So that is kind of everything I went over, and this again is the final result here. And I think it was quite successful. It's almost noise-free, I would say. There's some grain on top in Nuke. But yeah, I'm quite happy with this. And as you saw in my references here at the bottom, I have a lot more to cover. So you can see I'm probably working on this one the next. So pretty cool stuff in here, which I'm just trying to learn more a little bit about environments in my professional life as well. So just getting understanding how generalists work. This will be quite a good opportunity for me to just learn these new tools and get familiar with them. All right, everyone, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Leave any questions in the comments below. I love to read through them. And if you have any future suggestions for tutorials, post them below as well. And don't forget, you get the scene files on my Patreon, and I will see you in the next tutorial.